Hey everyone, Nick Yuskevich here with Daily Fantasy Winners, Tee to Green once again. And for this week's tournament is the Sony Open. This will be played at Wailea Country Club over on Oahu as usual. And so the things you need to know about this tournament is that this is the second and last event in Hawaii before moving over for the rest of the West Coast swing over in California and Arizona. And we have a traditional cut this week. There's 140 players in this tournament, full event. And this year it is a pretty solid field for the Sony this year. Usually it's kind of an average field, as far as strength goes. And it's still kind of average this year, but I'd say it's a little above average actually than normal for this year. And the winning score in this tournament is usually around 20 under par. At least it has been over the last handful of years, was more in the upper teens if you go back a little bit farther. But in any case, very scoreable course indeed. Some things you need to know about this golf course for your research. This is, of course, obviously at, like I said, Wailea Country Club. It is a par 70 and tips out at 7,044 yards. And since it is a par 70, we only have two par 5s on this golf course, which are holes 9 and 18. Number 9 at 510 yards and number 18 at 551 yards. So both par 5s are going to see several eagles. Neither hole is particularly that long. It's not really an advantage for longer hitters on those par 5s when it comes to the eagle scoring. Maybe slightly on 18 a little bit, but still it's very minimal. If so, just depends on how much you cut off on the dog leg there, since it's dog leg left. And so essentially at the end of the day, players on average will get about a half an eagle per player for the tournament. So if your player gets an eagle, you're already ahead of the curve. If you get a couple eagles, you're much well ahead of the curve. And actually, I think last year Morgan Hoffman got 4 eagles, and he's just an average length hitter. So that kind of, just one example, but there's several of them. But very rare, obviously, and unlikely someone will get 4 eagles this year. But just to kind of give you an idea. What else do you need to know about this golf course? Just a quick little description. This golf course has narrow-ish fairways. They're not super narrow, but more narrow than average. Tree-line fairways, not a lot of penalty strokes really off the tee. So it's not really favoring bombers, nor is it really favoring accuracy either. You'll find when you look into this. And then there are a few holes with water, but there's not a lot, and mostly it's little pond type things. It's not really the ocean that comes into play. There's some views of the ocean, but since it is on the coast, but not really the Pacific Ocean coming into play as far as the golf course is concerned. And the greens are relatively small as well, so something to keep in mind as well. So let's get into the meat of this as far as the strategy goes. First of all, on DraftKings, I really dislike the salary structure this week. It's a little different. They've kind of gone back to their old ways a little bit, at least this week, which I'm not too happy to see, to be perfectly honest. Spieth is the most expensive guy at $11,500, and the men's salary guys are $6K, and it usually has been the men's salary guys in these fields have been normally mid 5,000 range, or I think they even went a little below 5,500 if I remember right. I can't remember exactly, but in any case, so the men's salary is $6K now, and it's more bunched up. And the most expensive guys usually, if this was usually Spieth in some event like this or Matsuyama, they would be like 12.5 instead of 11.5 and 11. I don't like it when it's bunched up. It just basically makes making lineups easier for everybody, but that also makes it harder to get an edge a little bit sometimes. And just so I like it when the lineups are a little bit tougher to make, because there's more skill involved when knowing more about the golfers and the deeper pool and knowing more about the golf course and things of that nature. So also, there are some really good value plays according to the sportsbook odds. You should check out our odds per dollar page on DailyFantasyWinners.com. It combines the odds at about 25 different sports books or so to get a mean average for each player and how it does against, or what their expected value is against the player's price on DraftKings. And because of this, and with a full pool of players now, unlike last week, there will be several good value plays for cash, and there will also be several good under the radar and low ownership plays for GPPs. So you're not going to have to try too hard to differentiate your lineups here, but just still make sure you aren't doing chalk in GPP lineups, because then you could get burned with having duplicate lineups and everything like that. And definitely make sure you leave some salary on the table as well, a little bit in your GPPs. You still kind of want to do that. Don't have to make it a bunch, but usually at least a few $100s, like $500 is fine, roughly, give or take. Go a little more, go a tiny bit less if you want, but would not recommend GPPs. Usually not using absorbing all the salary. And then, as I already mentioned, distance really doesn't matter for Eagles here. But of the 4 strokes gained stats on the PGA Tour website, easily in doing research for this, strokes gained around the green, anything to do with scrambling, basically, that is by far the least important. Just don't worry about anything that has to do with scrambling, since these greens are relatively easy and small, and so it just makes it easy for everybody to scramble and get up and down a lot of the time. The 2 things that popped the most from the 4 strokes gained stats are, when I say the 4 strokes gained stats, I'm talking about off the tee, approaching the green, around the green, and putting. The 2 that popped up the most were approaching the green and putting. Those were the 2 most important. And even actually strokes gained off the tee came up a little bit as well. It did last year in particular. But approaching the green and putting are the 2 biggest. It's not substantial. It's not as big as like putting was last week at Kapalua, but those 2 were the most important. Approaching the green makes sense here, since these are small greens and you need to be more precise with your approaches to give yourself more opportunities for birdie. And strokes gained putting makes sense, since this is a more scoreable course, which means there are a lot of birdie putts, and the better putters have a better chance at succeeding. Pretty simple like that. And then usually with putting, usually the easier the course, the more strokes gained putting matters, because you're going to have more birdie opportunities, just to explain that. And then as far as the last thing I wanted to say, as far as this is the salary, this is having to do with the salary on DraftKings again. The upper 6K range price players, they are much better value and just for the most part better players right now than the lower 6K range. It's a pretty big gap in there. That's kind of what I was saying. I was surprised the min salary was 6K. That really should have been stretched out more to like 5,500 at least, if not more. So just basically saying, I'm not saying that the lower 6K range is completely off limits, but just saying this usually isn't a tournament to go all out on stars and scrubs. And so if you want to go a couple stars, that's perfectly fine. But just going more balanced is fine too. You can go either way there. But I just wouldn't do like 3 stars and 3 lower 6K guys, because you're just asking for trouble and don't need to try to differentiate that much in GPPs, and definitely would not be smart in cash play, since we have a cut and you want to get all 6 players through. That is priority number 1. So so let's move on right on to the picks. 2 picks here for you, and then you can check out the rest of them on DailyFantasyWinners.com. Top pick, again this week, Jordan Spieth at 11,500. He only had 3 bad holes last week, and one of them was just really unlucky, since he had to take an unplayable lie from a bunker. I think it was on the 2nd hole on Saturday's round, it would have been. Again, like I said, I played that course before, and that is insanely unlucky. That was never a spot that I should have had a ball plug. So in any case, he could have easily won the golf tournament, quite frankly, especially after he shot, I believe it was 65, where he went really deep on Sunday to get tie for 3rd, I think it was. So, and you're obviously getting a great price with the salary structure. So Spieth is the top play. I'm going to throw in another top play, just so I'm not throwing just the top price guy for you each time here so far. Paul Casey at 9,500. He is very good strokes gained approaching each year, this year being no exception, and he's usually a very solid putter as well each year. And so, like I said, strokes gained approaching the green and putting are kind of the more important things here. The odds per dollar definitely likes him as far as his value. And the one nice thing here is, from a GPP standpoint, is he has very little course history here. And so I'm thinking his ownership probably won't be too bad here. There aren't a ton of players in this price range, so I'm sure it'll still be double digits, but I don't think it's going to be very high here, and probably should be a little bit lower owned than some of the guys around him. So I think you're getting some nice value there on Casey for your GPPs. And so that's it for this video. And so for the rest of my picks and discussion about the tournament, head on over to DailyFantasyWinners.com into the PGA forum section. And of course, we always love, if you like these videos, to subscribe to our Daily Fantasy Winners page here on YouTube. And then you can follow Daily Fantasy Winners on Twitter at DFantasyWinners, or me on Twitter at Nick Yuskevich. All right, good luck, everybody.